Okay, so get straight. I'm on to the next. Here's what I want to talk about today. How do all of us find divinity? How do we find it? How do we hold it? Each and every one of us has, as it were, a panoply of, in a way, of gods, angels, whatever it is you think makes up your world of what's of beyond the physical, right? And each of us have a model of how that works. One of the important figures in Christianity is this person of Jesus, the historical Jesus of Christ, and I want to explore that a little bit today. But before, I want to focus a little bit on how the paths to enlightenment, as it were. Devotion is path to enlightenment. Devotion, which is really the heart, right? Your heart is just devoted to God. Devoted, you're loving, that's the path. There's the path of good works. I always think of Mother Teresa, she's just such a beautiful example. You know, there's the path of good works to enlightenment. There's the path of mystical experience, where you just actually experience divinity. And it's when I say mystical, there's really no words. You can describe it, but you can only experience it to know what that is. And I want to include humanism and rationalism too, because one of my very favorite teachers at Unity Ministerial School, when I was asking her about what her path to God was, she said it had to make sense. That enlightenment and spiritual growth and all of this path that we're on in Unity, it didn't just have to connect to her heart, it really had to connect to her brain. She needed it to make sense. Humanism is a rational philosophy, which is, it's actually lovely. I believe that we include it in our Unity beliefs, based on belief in the dignity of human beings, informed by science and motivated by human hope and human compassion. Doesn't sound bad to me. Rationalism is a belief or theory that opinions and actions should be based on reason and knowledge, rather than on religious belief or emotional response. I'm going to say including. So, you know, like I believe that Unity, as I say a lot, Unity is a big umbrella that includes Christianity and also not Christianity. And when I say not Christianity, it doesn't just mean Hinduism. It means Unity is a big umbrella that includes all belief systems and all the paths to whatever it is that divinity means to us. I mean, the thing I love the most about Unity is that we do not define divinity. We say you know, each one of us defines divinity. That's the only way it makes sense to me. Now, I have a little bit of a series this March. I want to go through some history, what we know, a little bit of history of exploring who the historical Jesus is. And so this is going to be about 5 minutes of brain work. Take a deep breath. I hope we all had a good breakfast. So let's have the first slide.
I didn't.
Let's see.
I can't see. She says.
First slide. And I think I need to turn the light. Okay.
Should I turn it on?
It's probably not on. She'll figure
And
it out real fast. She doesn't know go there.
to talk about who Jesus is, I want to first talk about some of the things I learned about who the people at the time where we believed that Jesus was hanging out. And this little 5-minute bit is going to focus on Jesus, the person of Nazareth, and where he came from. So one of the things to know is the history of the time, and let's start off with the isolation of Galilee from Jerusalem. So Galilee, right around, 30, there's Jerusalem. That is a map representing, it's like a symbolic map. There's Jerusalem. And it's in the time of the Second Temple, so it's right around 0 BCE or 30 BCE. And the Hebrew people, the heart of that community is in Jerusalem. Mind you, they've already been chased out and spread the diaspora twice already. Okay? And there's Galilee. Galilee had a very mixed population, only partly Jewish, and was much nearer to the Hellenistic influence than Jerusalem. Okay, that means what was happening in Greece. Traditionally, the peoples of Galilee were always somewhat isolated by the natural barriers of mountain chains, the Sea of Galilee, and the River Jordan. They did not feel joined with Jerusalem, so they had their own thing going on. Travel was different then. So there's Jerusalem, and in the middle there's Samaria, and there's Galilee. At this time, the Maccabean Hasmonean dynasty of priest-kings in Jerusalem, with fierce fighting in Galilee, whose people did not want to be incorporated into Israel.
2,000 years, nothing's changed.
The villages of Galilee, they did not resist Hellenization and were surrounded by cities on the Greek model, with schools, theaters, stadiums, markets, administrative offices, foreign legions, and transplanted people with franchises as citizens. So this is a very interesting time to be alive. There were not static, and people did not maybe go around, there were a lot of dangers or a lot of unrest, and a lot of mistrust of government, a lot of, and there were many people espousing philosophies, because when times are like that, people come up with ideas on how to live. So there were many, many people coming up with ideas and having groups of people meet, find out what's going on, learning how to live together. I'm gonna have to look this way. This is just showing that Galilee was 4 miles from Nazareth, or 4 miles from Sepphoris. Sepphoris was a Greek city, polis, had all these things: theaters, gymnasiums, baths, stadiums, marketplace, temples, schools for the upper class. And so a lot of things were happening. It was as if you lived maybe 4 miles from New York or something, or Miami, where a lot of change was happening. A lot of people were coming. This is just a map of Palestine. That purple thing is the Mediterranean Sea. The Levant refers to the eastern coast of the Mediterranean Sea. The word is derived from the French for rising. The sun rises in the east. That is a really cool representation of the river, the Sea of Galilee, the Jordan River, the Dead Sea, which is below sea level. There's Galilee. So Galilee, that's right, I remember now, Galilee is 4 miles from Nazareth, but right next to a Greek city, and 80 miles from Jerusalem. And through hostile Samaria, the land of the hated Samaritans. Only 1 hour walk from Nazareth to Sepphoris. 1 hour walk. And it was a 1-day walk to the other Greek cities, and a week walk from Nazareth to Jerusalem. So that's a little bit of the history. Now, I was really fascinated by this because I have always wanted to see what maybe Jesus would look like. And as many of us have noticed, that he probably a guy with brown curly hair and blue eyes. And he probably, but that's because we always create God in our image as much as we are created in God's image. We create God in our image. It's just natural. I think God looks like this. But what was fascinating to me about this, here's a little hard science. I'm not saying this is a picture of Jesus. Nobody's saying this is a picture of Jesus. But what we are saying is that this guy called Richard Neve, a medical artist, retired from the University of Manchester in England, used some forensic archaeology to try to create what somebody might look like at the time of Jesus. So here's what he did. He found some 3 skulls that were from the, had been found by archaeology expert who shared Semite skulls right around the time when Jesus would have been around. He used computers and how they do, I'm sure you guys have seen all those CSI shows where they recreate faces. So that's what he did with the skulls and recreated a face. The 2 key factors which could not be determined from the skull, Jesus' hair and color, to fill in these parts of the picture, Nave's team turned to drawings found at various archaeological sites dated to the 1st century. And what they decided was that Jesus most likely had dark rather than light-colored eyes, and they also pointed out that in keeping with Jewish tradition, he was bearded as well and probably had short hair, even though for some reason we have the picture of Jesus with the long hair. Most of the men at that time would have had hair like that. So that, you can get rid of that picture. So that's why that's it. And, the reason for me to delve into that was, one of the things I learned about in school was that their archaeology and Bible archaeology had really come quite a long way, and that we, in this day and age, have learned so much about finding out where did the stories come, and why is that important? It is important to use some reason. It is very important for us in this day and age when people are fighting in the name of religion. It is very important for us to broaden our framework, as it were, to have a frame of reference that allows everybody to connect to divinity in the way they want to connect, without judgment and without, certainly without fighting and really killing. No killing in the name of God, right? That just we all get how absurd that is. But it's important for us to educate ourselves and explore it, and it is important for us to connect how we want. Now, the next thing I want to do is I want to read you this beautiful interpretation. What? The man who made the slides, one of my professors, Professor Niall at school, he made the slide for her because he could do all that fancy stuff with PowerPoint. And he was a scholar in that line. But he wrote this beautiful reading of what it might have been like if we had time traveled back to one of the rooms where Jesus was talking. So just listen. So now instead of your critical thinking, use your imagination. This is one person's interpretation of what his knowledge of what it was like to be alive at that time, what it might have been like to be in a room with this person. The soft wind enters the window, carrying fragrance that wraps the room and stills every one of us. And right now, we are in Galilee in the year 28 of the Common Era. We are sitting in a large, comfortable living room with about 30 other people. A man is standing in the middle of the room. It is Yeshua, the young man from Nazareth. Yeshua is holding his arms out and not speaking. We know that this is one of his ways of showing love. He is allowing himself to model the stillness and fullness of being in a state of love. After several minutes, he says, I love you. I love you. My close friends, bring even your enemies into your love. This is the way of the kingdom of God. All of the people in the room reach out as Yeshua is doing and say, I love you. I love you. This is the way in the kingdom of God. I love you, even my enemies. Another young man rises from his seat and stands beside Yeshua. He also speaks in Greek, as Yeshua does, saying, I was in Sepphoris yesterday, and I heard an orator in the amphitheater say that the great Greek philosopher Plato was well aware of the struggle to be a virtuous person in a world full of temptation. Yeshua interrupts the man simply by extending his arms, and he says, love, my friend. Love is virtue enough. Yeshua stands for several minutes, saying nothing more. He simply shows us a model of being deeply in love. A woman stands beside Yeshua and also speaks in Greek. She says, it is wonderful that one so young as Yeshua portrays to us the beauty we all have when feeling love. Thank you, dear one. Now all of you come back next week here in my home. Please stay now for the meal. Later, after the Galileans have finished the meal and have left the house, the woman of the house and those of us from the future sit with Yeshua to talk. We ask Yeshua about his schooling. He tells us, I have studied since I was 4 with a Hebrew teacher. We use the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible because we don't really know much about Hebrew. We know Aramaic better, though we have forgotten much of it too. And anyway, we do not have an Aramaic Bible. I also go once a week to Decapolis to study with several dedicated Cynic philosophers. You see, I inform people that come to these Kingdom of God meetings of Cynic ideas because they ring true. The same with Plato, like that friend wanted to quote in our meeting. You see, what I experience much more is mystical, extending who I am by going to the heart. The heart generates love, which I know is more elevating and energizing than dwelling on another person's thoughts too much. However, I do study and teach important new ideas. One of our groups speaks up. Yeshua, are you a healer? Yeshua replies, I am not a healer. I am happy to say that Galilee has plenty of good healers. I have not studied the healing art. I am, though, like a lot of other people who can do as well as I, a careful observer of life. What we observe is that when people feel love deeply, they so rejoice in life that they are simply cured of any illness. That is why people like ourselves accept the work of teaching love. It has been our work since childhood. We do it well because we are ourselves filled with love. It is who we naturally are. We know love is the only key to God's kingdom. So in a sense, all lovers are healers, and I do love you. Another soft wind blows in through the window, this time carrying only the sense of oxygen in the air. We all quicken our breathing, ready to spend more moments with Yeshua. He so clearly shows us the way to love and live. So that was Harvey's interpretation, which is just as valuable as anybody's interpretation, your interpretation. One of the things I was thinking about yesterday, Roland likes to watch Downton Abbey, and it's, for some reason I don't, he does, which is odd because I'm very British oriented. And I watch it occasionally. I wander into the room and I see it. And it's a genre, right? It's a genre. And the interesting thing about Downton Abbey is it portrays people maybe 100 years ago, right? Maybe a little less, but about 100 years ago in Great Britain. And it seems like they do a fantastic job. But here is one thing I know for sure. I know for sure that it is still looking back through the lens, no matter how historically accurate, it's still looking through the lens of us. It's still looking through the lens of people who are alive now. You can't help it. Unless we really could go back in time 100 years, or really go back in time and have this out and out, you know, the way we do TV now, like if there was like a Big Brother or something 100 years ago where they just had the film camera in there, it might be a little more accurate, but we have that lens, right? We cannot help but have our lens when we're looking back 100 years ago. Well, think how much more we have a lens and interpretation of 2,000 years ago. We really do. There's things about what people were writing and talking and teaching that we can't know. I read this morning that it is not that people in ancient times were interpreting, that made up stories like the myths, and that we now are smart enough to interpret these stories with allegory. But the people back then, like, they knew that that was an allegory. I guess my last little case in front of the jury is this. I read an interview by J.K. Rowling, and as far as I'm concerned, the interviewer asked the most ridiculous question ever. J.K. Rowling wrote the Harry Potter books. And this person said, so do you think there's a place where, you know, where people are magic and there's a Diagon Alley and where there's wizards and we're muggles and we don't know about it? And I don't even remember what J.K. Rowling said, but when I saw that question, I just like, of course not, she wrote it! Like, she knows it's not real. Doesn't mean that there's not truth or, you know, great messages or joy or whatever in the story. But she wrote it. She doesn't have a secret belief that there is a school of wizards named Hogwarts. It's the same thing for many of the stories in the Bible and the myths, the great myths of all the different cultures. It's, like I said, it's like a genre. And at the time, people knew it was a genre. I'm guessing that in the time of ancient Greece and the stories of let me think of ancient of Hercules, kind of like, I grew up in the Northwest. We had Paul Bunyan. I knew Paul Bunyan really wasn't that big. So that's my last case in front of the jury, to keep an open mind and to realize that it is up to us to connect to divinity, and we will keep exploring the historical Jesus and the time and the Gospels, because there's amazing, fascinating things to learn. Let us take an offering for unity. I invite you to take your tithe